Welcome into the Musketeer Report Podcast. It is June 25th, 2024. And for this edition of the show, I am joined by the big man, Kenny Frease, former Xavier big man turned rising Xavier media star. Kenny, what's the latest on the media front? Do you guys have some new things cooking with the Roll Blob podcast, or do you know what's next for this year?
I mean, it's just a work in progress, because we're learning everything as we go. We've joked about it a couple times on the podcast. I'm kind of like the AV guy, and I don't have a background in that. So I'm just like watching YouTube videos endlessly and kind of trying to learn that stuff, just working my way through it. But we got some plans coming up for the summer. I think we're going to do some different things with like the new NCAA football game that's coming out, doing like a Roll Blob Dynasty League. But as far as the season goes, I feel like we're going to hit the ground running.
So one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on here was to dive into Xavier's new look front court. I feel like last year it was a frequent topic of conversation, especially with Sean Miller in post-game interviews or press conferences. And this year it's completely different in terms of the personnel. So we don't really know a whole lot. We haven't gotten to see any of these guys yet in terms of practices or even playing any exhibition or Musketeer Madness or anything like that. But we just want to talk about what we do know based off of their previous stats and the little video we've seen and just sort of our thoughts overall. And obviously you have guys like Zach Freemantle and Jerome Hunter that will be returning from their absences last season. But before we get into that, just a couple of things to hit on in terms of storylines this week. The first is, Kenny, do you follow recruiting at all? Do you follow Xavier recruiting being a former player? Do you care about that?
Is there any reason to anymore? You know what I mean? I feel like 2, 3, 4 years ago it was like, oh, we got this big recruit coming on campus or whatever it is. But now it's like, you never know if the guy's going to be there for 1 year, 4 years, 7 years in some guys' cases. I mean, like, how long is he going to be a Xavier Musketeer? It's not that I don't care about it, but at the same time, you're going shopping in the portal every season now. And it's like, it's tough. It's, in my opinion, it's just really tough for seniors coming out of high school to find their footing in this era, because it's really hard when you see teams, they're looking for somebody that's going to be able to plug and play right into their system. And when you can watch those guys against high level Division I talent, or go after a high school kid that may pan out in a couple years, or, you're going to see guys that really can help the team. But it's difficult for seniors in high school right now. And it's hard to like really be interested in the recruiting process.
Yeah. I think there's a growing sentiment that way with fans right now. I've seen that a little bit on the message board of like, wake us up when the transfer portal gets back here next year. But I think the coaching staff, the coaches around the country were saying things like that a month ago. And then now they're like in the middle of recruiting season. They're like, well, actually we do kind of need some of these young guys to restock our roster. But one of the big storylines this week for Xavier is Jalen Harrell is going to announce his decision on Monday, this next coming Monday, July 1st. Providence, Xavier, Rutgers, Virginia Tech, Alabama, and Kansas is his final list. But really, Providence, Xavier, and Rutgers were the three schools that he visited. Xavier was his most recent visit. If you remember, he visited Xavier, then he was supposed to commit the following week. He then announced like, hey, I'm not sure, this decision's harder than I was expecting, so I'm going to push the decision off. And we were thinking maybe like he'd visit Virginia Tech, or maybe Rutgers would try to get him back on another visit, or Alabama was getting in there. And that's why he decided to postpone it. As it stands, he never made any other visits. So it would seem that this is really coming down to Xavier and Providence. That seems to be the latest intel that I've been hearing, that our Providence 24/7 beat writer's been hearing. But aside from that, I don't really know any more information. The other guy that there was a little bit of news about was Xavier Robinson, a point guard from the Indianapolis area. Great name for being a Xavier basketball player. He announced that he's down to 5 schools: Butler, Cincinnati, DePaul, Notre Dame, and Xavier. He's scheduled September visits to all of those schools except for Cincinnati. And I will tell you, I think Notre Dame right now is the favorite to land him. They seem to be out in front from everything I've heard. But from now until September is a long time, and he has all those visits to make. So we'll see what happens when it gets closer to that point. One other bit of news there, the Sean Miller podcast, we always like to talk about that on this show. You've actually been on that show. So what was that experience like? Because they do a great job with it. I think the fans really love listening to it. What did you think about going on there?
I mean, the first thing that came to my mind, obviously, like trying to do our podcast and just like how we kind of throw everything together, like it's a well-oiled machine. They have people that are, they have somebody for every single thing. Paul Frischner and Adam Baum. I mean, obviously Coach Miller is you're going to get good at media being a coach for that long. But those two guys hosting the podcast, they make you very comfortable. It's, you really feel like you're just having a conversation. It was a lot. I had a lot of fun doing it.
Are you surprised that Sean is as good at that as he is, or did you already know that from his first stint here? Like, has he changed in that regard?
I don't really remember too much what he was like with the media my freshman year.
Sure.
I can't imagine that he was like as polished as he is now, but I just think when you meet as many people as he does, and he's the one that everybody wants to listen to, right? So it's a lot easier to talk when people want to listen to you, Yeah. So I think but he has been extremely good at it, and it is, it's so fun just listening to the stories and all I watch every episode. I mean, just listening to the stories that he has and just the perspective that he brings to the game. It's a lot of fun to listen to.
Yeah, the last two episodes were with Ryan Conwell and then with his father, John Miller. And there are a couple good moments in each of these podcasts. One of them I wrote about, talking about his 3 favorite ways to score on offense. And, for guys that follow basketball, are really into this stuff, obviously it's nothing new. You've heard all of these things, like you're looking for high percentage shots, first of them being getting to the free throw line, second of them being getting paint touches and scoring at the rim, and the third being open 3-point looks. But just the way he's able to break these things down so clearly and make it such a part of like the system. And it's not optional to do these things. Like if you get a mismatch within Sean Miller's offense, that was on purpose, and you're going to take advantage of it. It's not like, well, it wasn't quite there. I thought I had an open look too. It's like, no, we got the big guy with a guard on him. You have to hit that guy every single time. And that's where I think like he really stands out to me, is the way he delivers those messages and makes it, he holds you to such a high standard with it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And the thing that you notice a lot too is, when you watch the NBA, when there's a mismatch, they just like clear out the floor and they force it down to that mismatch. You don't ever feel that way. At least in my opinion, you don't feel that way when a Sean Miller team is taking advantage of a mismatch like that. Like you said, he did it on purpose. It's part of the play, and they're going to get the ball to that person within the offense. It's not like, hold the ball for 10 seconds, let that guy post up and let the defense crowd around him. They're doing it on purpose, and it is really interesting. The one thing that I will say is in the Ryan Conwell interview, he kept calling it Xavier. And we're going to have to talk to him.
Yeah. I know Xavier fans are very sensitive about that. So I try to give guys a little, like, if you live in other parts of the country, you hear people name that or whatever, it's what you're used to,
Yeah.
So
we'll give him a week. We'll give him a week.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things in the John Miller episode, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, that I thought was a good conversation, is Sean brought up how, like, when they were kids and their dad was kind of getting them used to playing, that they would go around to different parks trying to find tough pickup games to play, and they'd stay at the park all day. Winner stays on the court, and if not, you're trying to get back on there, obviously. And he said, like, nowadays the kids, the guys are still working hard, but he said, like, guys will be looking around for a shooting coach or a personal trainer, and they'll spend 4 hours in a gym every day over the summer working with a personal trainer to try to add to their skill level. And he talked about the impact that, like, Steph Curry and the Euro players have had on the game, that everyone is so worried about raising their skill level and being able to do all these different things with the ball, whether it be step back threes or different ways of shooting the jumper, what have you. I thought that was interesting because it's something that's talked about a lot. I think it's been brought up in different ways, but I'd never heard it sort of brought up the way Sean talked about it in depth there, and talked about the impact that Curry and the Euro players have had, and how there is a difference there between he didn't say it as, like, a lot of times when you hear old timers saying, like, guys aren't competitive anymore because they don't play pickup like we used to. There's no, like, reason for it. And Sean's like, these guys are still working hard. They're just, like, spending their time doing something different than we did. There's some good elements to that, but there's a lot of bad too.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it really depends on how you're working out. If you're doing those things at game speed, I mean, there's never going to be anything that can simulate a game like a game. You know what I mean? Like, you can go out, you can have these coaches that are putting you through workouts where you're going full speed, 35, 40, 50, 60 minutes, whatever it is. And that can only take you so far, because there's such a mental part of the game that I think a lot of players overlook. And I bring it up with a guy like Tu Holloway. Obviously, I had a lot of experience with him, and his work ethic in the summer is very well known, very well documented. He put in a lot of work individually, but when we would go play pickup, and we would play, open gyms. And in the summertime, we would play like a couple nights a week at like 8:00 in the Cintas. There was it was pedal to the metal. You would have thought it was an NCAA championship game. So I think that there's a balance there. You have to have that feeling of playing, number one, playing with your teammates, but number two, just like putting yourself in situations on the floor where you may not be comfortable yet, and being able to work that into your game and having that game sense for when the season comes around, because that's, in my opinion, just as important as the skill set of each individual player.
How was it for you when you were in like middle school and high school? Were you playing like a ton of pickup on city courts, or were you getting a lot of rec in, or was it a lot of skill work? Or
I had my high school coach. I had strength and conditioning coaches that my parents would take me to. And, but as far as like playing went, I would go play with the high school kids when I was in like 6th, 7th grade. I would play with the high school kids. And I was like, at that point I was like 6'3". By the time I was in seventh grade, I was 6'3", 8th grade, I was 6'6". So it was like, I was growing and I was big enough to play with those kids, but coordination wise and just like strength and body, it was really tough. But as far as just like pickup stuff, I started playing really high level AAU basketball, and that basically took up all summer. We started, I don't remember the timelines of it at this point, but we were playing a tournament every weekend for 2-3 months straight.
Yeah, so that's like the other side of this argument is I hear that a lot more is like I hear guys play too many games in AAU and don't actually practice and work on their skills enough. So I don't know what the right answer is necessarily, but just the way Sean sort of laid it out in that podcast was interesting to hear, because anytime he's talking basketball and his philosophies on the game, like he's so well spoken about it and so thoughtful about it. It's just like, oh, that's an interesting perspective, whether I agree or not,
Yeah. Well, and it's just there's never going to be one exact thing that's best for everybody. Everybody's an individual, finding out what works best for those guys. And I can tell you, if I had to pick one person in the world to figure that out for each individual guy, it would probably be Coach Miller.
Fair enough. Well, let's get into talking about this year's team a little bit, because that's what the people want to hear from you, especially some of your thoughts on what they did this offseason and what's upcoming this year. Now, again, couch this with the understanding that we haven't seen these guys in workouts yet. It's not open to everybody to go in there. You as a former player could probably go wherever you want, but I haven't been in these workouts yet. And, that we don't know much about these guys other than the things that we've talked about on the website and the videos that you guys have seen on YouTube and all of those things. But we'll give you our thoughts anyway. So I want to start with this starting lineup as we sit here on June 25th, just trying to figure out who is going to be in this starting five. And we're not going to hold you to this. It's obviously subject to change, but what would you guess is the starting lineup right now?
I think the backcourt is set. McKnight, Conwell, Maddox. I don't think you're going to see any deviation from that. They're going to be too good. When you get into the front court, it gets a little bit more tricky, because I think there may be a case to play Fremantle at the 5. I don't know. With Hugley being as big as he is, he's a big body. So I think that having him play the 5 and kind of freeing Fremantle up to play the 4 a little bit and kind of put him in what would be a more natural position for him, I would say. I think that does make sense. And I know that we were talking about that before the show, but I do see a world where, they're able to play Dalen Swain at the 4. I don't know if he's going to start, but I think you can play him at the 4, because I don't know where as much as I love the kid, and I think he's really, really good and he's going to be really good, I don't know how well he fits in with the backcourt. So I think he's going to have to kind of find his ways to be that, that curveball at the 4. But I would think that probably Fremantle at the 4 and Hugley at the 5 makes sense.
Yeah, I would too. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the development that has to take place for some of these guys and where they're at right now, where they have to get to earn those roles. There's an argument that Traore may start at the 5 over Hugley, I think, but we can get into all that. I am curious about that small ball lineup, because you talked about Swain playing the 4, and I think that's enticing to me because of the promise there. And one of the things I've heard most, if you talk to anybody behind the scenes right now that's inside the program or has been in these workouts, the number one thing I've been hearing from guys is probably that Zach Fremantle looks great, best he's looked. And the second thing is Dalen Swain's physical maturation and the jump he's looking poised to make. Everyone's talking about that too.
Yeah.
So
you can see that just from watching him play as a freshman a couple games, you can see that how raw he is because he's so young. You see how raw he is, and just like when he's able to like really get his college body, he's going to be. I mean, I said it from the very beginning of the year last year. I absolutely love that kid.
Yeah, it seems like the light bulb kind of went off for him of like, oh, I need to take this weight room seriously, and I can be doing some real things next year in the Big East. And he's allegedly up to 217 pounds now, which is a big difference from last year. I think he was somewhere around 200 in terms of listed weight. So that's exciting for Xavier fans. But there's another guy here that I think gets overlooked a lot with what they did in the transfer portal, and that's Marcus Foster. I keep hearing a lot of positive things about the way he's shooting the ball in preseason workouts right now, in summer workouts. And last year, his three-point shooting percentage dipped down to 29%. So I think that's part of why he's getting overlooked, and understandably so, compared to guys like Maddox and Conwell, who shot over 40% last year. Right. But this is a guy that shot about 35, 36% for his career from beyond the arc. I've talked to Jeremy Groh, who's a former Xavier staffer, who's been the associate head coach at Furman and coached him. And he said, we let him take like 7 threes per game. We clearly thought the guy could shoot. He was in a slump for an extended period last year, but he can definitely shoot it. That's not something I'd be concerned about. So I like the idea of potentially, you think about a lineup with like Trey Green at the 1, Conwell or Maddox at the 2, Conwell or Maddox at the 3, and then Foster at the 4. Now you're giving up a lot of size there. There are concerns about the defense there, but from a 3-point shooting perspective, that's unlike any lineup that they could put on the floor within the last several years.
Yeah, and the other thing, I completely agree with Foster, because I remember when he first committed, I was talking to Adam Baum, and I was like, this dude shot 29% from 3 last year, and then he started bringing up everything you had brought up about how he's a better shooter than what his numbers look like. And a summer working out and really putting time into building up your confidence, I don't think that there's going to be any real pressure on him by the time the season starts, because there's so much time till the first game, and there's so many workouts to get through that confidence is going to come back. But just talking about 3-point shooting, I was going, like I told you, I was going through and I was just like doing a little bit of extra research about these guys today. And the thing that really stood out to me that I didn't realize before is that pretty much every single guy on the team really is able to at least stretch the floor a little bit, or at least keep you honest. I mean, even like, Hugley shot like something like 29 to 31% from 3 last year or something like that. And he's able to go off the dribble and drive in a straight line. He's not going to cross you up and do crazy stuff, but he's able to make straight line drives and kind of keep you honest in that way. It's such a huge change from last year, when we have, and no disrespect to anybody, but you have Abu and Sasha, who were 100% inside players. Abu hit a couple threes throughout the year, but like, when you hit one of those, you're like, no. Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to be interesting. I'm really excited. And it kind of got me all fired up today watching all these guys, because it's going to be sweet to see how Coach Miller can put them all together and hopefully build a team that can do some damage.
So talking about some of those front court guys is a good segue, because that's what I really wanted to maybe do more of a deep dive here on tonight with you. You'd be the expert on front court play at Xavier, and they have a completely different looking front court than they did a season ago, and I think that was necessary. Now, you don't want to always have to rely on the transfer portal for as many guys as maybe they are this year, but when you have a roster like you did last year, I think it was pretty clear that wasn't going to get it done in the Big East, especially in terms of the front court play. So they added John Hughley from Oklahoma, Lassina Traore from Long Beach State. They also have Cam Fletcher from Florida State, who could contribute in the front court as the season goes on. He's coming back from back-to-back ACL injuries. What were your thoughts on what they did in the transfer portal from a front court perspective?
It's like you just said, it's night and day, because you go from a team where the glaring obvious weakness was the front court. They had last year with Q and McKnight and Dez and those guys. They had the talent to match up against teams in the backcourt. I don't think there was really any games where we were completely outmatched from that standpoint. But you go from that to now what I feel like is going to be a strength of ours with, you look at Zach, right? At Fremantle, you have the amount of experience that he has. Obviously, he's been in college for a decade. Like his leadership and I'm just messing around because I love that he gets to be there that long because, especially with the climate of college basketball right now, why wouldn't you stay in college for as long as possible? I mean,
yeah, no kidding.
I would have done it. But leadership wise, experience wise, I think he's going to bring a lot from just a Big East perspective because he's played it, he's dominated it, he's done really well in it. But like rebounding is always, you're always going to get rebounding from him. He's gonna be able to score the ball. And I kind of think the same way about Hunter when he starts to be able to come back. His leadership, his rebounding, all the intangibles that he brings to the game. Those two guys being able to bring the experience to the new guys that didn't play. I mean, I know that they played in bigger conferences, but it's just different. Big East basketball is a grind, and playing in front of the Cintas Center can be a grind sometimes if you're not playing well. And we saw that last year with the way that the fans kind of reacted to Abu and Sasha and Lazar at times. So I think that having those guys to really like kind of show them the ropes of what the Big East is, and then obviously bringing their already honed, semi-honed skill sets to the Big East and being able to help Xavier put together a team. I think that they did incredible in the portal.
So John Hughley, let's start with him specifically because he's a guy that when they took him, they knew he's going to have to work himself back into shape. He missed the end of last year with the knee injury. He played all of last year, quite honestly, a little bit too heavy. And they were talking about how he needed to get in shape last year at Oklahoma. That's something he's battled throughout his career. The pictures have come out of him on Instagram from Xavier, and that's something that people have been commenting on, that he's going to have to really slim down. I mean, it's obvious, and that's part of the job, right? At this point, you are literally getting paid six figures to play college basketball. People are going to talk about those types of things. They already did before you were getting paid. They're certainly going to now when you are getting paid well to do it. It's uncomfortable, but it's part of the game for them, and he's going to have to work himself into shape. How difficult of a process do you think that's going to be, given that he has about 5 months before the season starts?
Well, first of all, I went through that, right? I mean, when I'm going from my sophomore year to my junior year, I went from like 305 to 265. It's not impossible. Like, number one, you have to want to do it, which, I did. I wasn't getting as much playing time. I didn't get as much playing time in my sophomore year as I feel like I really even did my freshman year. So I knew that there was something about what I was doing that I wasn't getting enough playing time or what I felt I deserved or whatever it was. And weight was clearly one of those things. I mean, from my sophomore year to my junior year, when you look at pictures, I mean, it's like I don't even look like the same person. Yeah. So it's definitely possible. And I don't know what he weighs right now, but I wouldn't imagine that he's in a position where he's having to lose 40 pounds. You know what I mean? Like I would assume that he's probably closer to like, 20 pounds. If you're losing 2 pounds a week for 10 weeks, it's not that big of a deal to do that. And have you seen Xavier's strength coach? He's going to get it done. He's going to get it done. I'm telling you right now, talking to that guy for about 10 minutes, I'm like, man, my strength coaches were tough. Don't get me wrong, but talking to him for about 5 minutes, I'm like, man, I'm happy he wasn't my strength coach.
Yeah. If there's one person I'm not betting against, it's Andy Kettler in that race. So I don't feel like John's going to have too many options. It's either going to be get himself in shape or he won't be with the program to see the end of how that works out otherwise. Right. So, exactly. And the crazy thing is, if he can get back to the type of shape that he was in as a sophomore at Pitt, and now that is a couple years ago at this point, but that year he was a legit, I don't want to say dominant, that's probably a little bit too strong, but one of the better low post scorers, certainly in the ACC, maybe in the entire country. It's like really his numbers and his efficiency and the things that he was doing on a team that wasn't very good and was relying on him to be a main scoring option were pretty impressive. So I really think there's a lot of upside there, but it adds to the variance of this team. I think the floor is a little bit lower because of a guy like him, but the ceiling is also a little bit higher because of a guy like him, because if he hits his true potential, you really could have something special down low.
Yeah. And I think the big difference between him and the other two guys that they brought in, when I was watching the tape on him, he really finishes through people rather than going around people. And I think that having that, I mean, you don't think about it when you're sitting there watching the game, right? But when you're going through the game and you're playing defense against a guy that's doing that to you 10, 15 times a game, and they're just going straight through your chin, number one, I mean, it's not necessarily that you're backing up, but it gets tiring having to like put your weight into that and, try and stop it. So I think that if he's able to get himself into shape, he will be able to wear down opponents pretty easily because of how big he is. And like I said before, his skill set, I don't know necessarily he's the kind of guy that has like 1,000 moves in the post. It looks like he's more of like a take it to the middle, spin baseline and finish through you.
Yeah.
And then he's got a little bit of junk to his game. Like I saw him hit a couple fadeaway shots and things like that, but I don't think that's really going to be his bread and butter. But I'm excited to see what he's able to do because I mean, he's 6'10", he's a big dude. So there's not a lot of people in the country that are going to be able to handle that over and over and over again. Now, I mean, you have, the UConns and whatever, they're going to have matchups for him. But when you pair that with everything they got going on in the backcourt and, Fremantle's back and you got to deal with him too, how are you going to double? Like who can you double from? I really think it's going to be an interesting and fun team to watch.
That's the point right there. If you can get Hughley back to that point as a legit low post threat, then having him and Zach on the court together. Now, don't get me wrong. I have my concerns about defensively, what you're going to look like with those two on the floor together and how you're going to defend ball screens, all that. But on the other end, when you're on offense, the opponent's not going to have a lot of options with what they're able to do defensively against you either, because both of those guys can pass, they're skilled, they can score, and Zach can draw the defense out a little bit, play at the top of the key. Mm-hmm. So that's really, I think, going to be a potent offense if both of those guys are playing well. Zach, I mean, you don't have many concerns about how he'll play. It's really just about the health. And with Hughley, it's about him working himself back into shape and being reliable enough, I think. The other guy that we were talking about was Lassina Traore. And he's one that I don't know as much about. I do know Abu Usman was ranked higher in like the analytics service that all these coaching staffs use and Xavier subscribes to. Abu Usman was ranked higher, but I think this might be a situation where having like a guy who maybe fits a little bit better the role that you're asking of him and has better expectations for what he's going to be for your team may be like addition, not by subtraction, but he may give you more without being as good of a player overall, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think, you're definitely right about that because he's filling that defensive role and, he can protect the rim decently well. He's not as big as Hughley, but he's definitely more athletic. He moves better. I think ball screen wise, he's definitely going to be better. But I could see him being a starter. I really could. It's just, like you said, it's going to depend on what kind of shape Hughley can get himself in. I think it's his spot for the taking unless somebody, outperforms him this summer or works harder than him or whatever it is.
Well, on that point, how coaches are. You're getting the start of the season. You haven't been in shape as much. This other guy is in shape. And from what I hear, Traore's moving well. He's playing fast. He's running the court well. It's easier for the coach to dangle the carrot for the first 5 non-conference games and say, look, you haven't earned it. Even though everyone can see in practice one-on-one, you're beating this guy and you're the more talented player. It's oftentimes easy for the coach to be like, he's going to start for the first 4 minutes, right?
Right, yeah. And I think as a player, the older you get, and the more experience you get, you don't worry about starting as much. You're worrying about how many minutes you're playing. For me, I always wanted to start because, I'm a big guy, so like I'm not gonna play 40 minutes. So it's like if you put me in with 36 minutes to go, now I only have 36 minutes to hopefully get my 25 to 30 minutes instead of 40. So that's a whole other conversation. But you're right though. That's definitely, and especially with Coach Miller's offense, with how fast they play. He's kind of going to be the prototypical guy that he would be looking for in a 5-man. But if you can be a dominant scorer and you can show why you should be on the floor, then coach will probably mold his game plan a little bit to him if he's good enough to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think maybe the fun thing for the coaching staff, assuming all goes according to plan and both these guys are sort of close to their peak of what you're hoping for, is you have one guy who is an offensive weapon and gives you a certain look. You're playing through him on offense a little bit. It's really making teams think about how they're going to guard you. And then you have this other guy that comes in and you may defend a completely different way when he's in the game. You might be switching up some of your looks defensively. He's giving you energy. He's rebounding the heck out of the ball. He's letting you play a little faster. Like, I think they have 2 different looks with this team. And if you look at some of the other teams that have done really well recently, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to compare this front court to what UConn had last year, but when you think about UConn's front court last year, it was like 2 completely different looking teams, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
I think maybe that's what they're hoping for. If everything goes according to plan, that's what they have in place going into this season.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot you can do with bigger guys on ball screens. I mean, you can kill them and you can make them go out and hedge ball screens, and it's going to shorten the game for them. They're not going to be able to play as many minutes, but there's so many options. You can ice ball screens, you can switch you can double switch. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but you're right though. I think that Traore and Fletcher, when he starts coming back, especially Fletcher, I think that he kind of looks like a guy that would be able to defend 2 through 5. Like he's quick, and I don't know if Traore is that quick, but I do think that he would be able to switch out onto a 3-man or at least contain a 1 or 2 for long enough to find a way to switch back. But with Hugley, you're not going to be able to just flat out switch ball screens. So I don't know. The game has changed so much, and there's so many teams that just switch everything now. So it could end up being a problem, but we'll just have to see what the game plan is going into the season.
Yeah, it's like who knows what that'll actually look like, but I can just see kind of two completely different
100%.
based on those two big men, and I think that's an exciting thing for a coaching staff when they're like, we can give you multiple looks.
Well, yeah, because every team's different. You have a punch to throw at them no matter what they're going to throw at you.
Yeah. Where do you place your expectations for Zach Freemantle and Jerome Hunter? Like, start with Zach. They're both coming back from different situations, obviously, but this is a tough thing for me when I think about this year's team, because so much of it is based on those guys coming back and being really good. When you think about expectations of this being a top 25 team, it's like, how much should we be counting on that?
I can tell you, I've never had to go through a situation where I didn't play a whole season. I mean, I think I missed maybe 2 games when I was at Xavier. So I don't really have any experience in that. But I guess for me, with the amount of work that it seems like, and just being around Freemantle, he just seems so laser focused all the time, even in the locker room and just out on the court doing his workouts by himself. When I was watching him work out right before the Sean Miller podcast last year. And I mean, he's just out there going 100 miles an hour and just by himself. He's got a trainer with him or somebody rebounding, whatever it is. You can tell that he really wants to be good, and he could make a lot of money playing this game. Probably not in the NBA, but he can make a lot of money playing overseas somewhere, because he is like exactly what they want. Just, bigger guys that are quicker than average, and they can, score in different ways. He could be really good professionally. So I think that he still has a lot to play for as far as building his career. So if he's able to come back and he's in as good a shape as everybody's saying that he is, and he obviously has the experience, he knows how to play at a high level in this league. I don't see any reason why he's not all Big East. But that really depends on him coming back and being who he was. Yeah. And it's just impossible and staying healthy, obviously, but it's impossible as anybody but him to know how he's feeling. If he's feeling that way, if he's feeling he's going to be able to come back and be that good.
So I think there was like a narrative, and I don't know if this is fair or not. You would be the perfect person to ask about during your career, that there was kind of like a maturation process that took place where you sort of turned a corner and started playing better basketball because you all of a sudden sort of got it. Right. There's been a lot of talk about this offseason that maybe just having the game taken away from him, that Zach is really, he already was sort of turning the corner with Coach Miller. He played really well for that season, and then he has the game taken away from him, and everyone's talking about like it's just a different kid right now. He seems to really have matured and really appreciates, and he's just got a different energy. How much stock do you put in that in terms of like what it'll equate to on the basketball court? I
mean, it's like it means everything. When you get that, when you change your mindset from it's a game to this is my future. This is what am I going to do after college? It just changes your whole perspective on everything, because working out is not just like a means to go play games. Working out is a means to better your future. You know what I mean? Like there's just a different feeling that you have in every part of the game, from practice to the weight room to, your conditioning to going out and playing the games. The way you approach it's so much different. And I think that you're right about, just because I've heard that a lot too. And that's why I was saying before. And I saw him on the court and I saw him in the locker room. It's just like, it seems like it's the only thing he thinks about is getting back on the court. And I have high hopes for him. and it really is just going to depend on if his foot's able to hold up, which based on everything they're saying, and they wouldn't say anything negative about what his foot is if
right.
not publicly. So but based on everything they're saying, it's better than before. So, we'll have to see.
Yeah. And then with Jerome, I mean, it's so traumatic. You're coming back from a heart attack where it's a situation that's crazy, that sort of seems mysterious to some extent. Like they don't even know, will he be able to come back and play? And then just as things are looking good there, you get the Achilles injury, and that's a significant surgery to come back from as well. Yeah. My thing this whole time, and I know from a Xavier perspective, it's like Zach and Jerome are back. They'll be starting, like they're going to be ready to go. But realistically, I just don't know if I'm buying into Jerome being ready to go for the start of the season. I find he could work his way back into the mix at some point, but like him starting the season, I find that hard to believe to me. Yeah.
And I don't see any real reason to push it if he's not if he's not 100% ready to go, and like, there's just no reason for that. But I think that Jerome is the heart and soul of the team. He's, with everything that he's been through for his entire career, like everything you just laid out that he's been through at Xavier, the way that he was able to come into that NCAA tournament in the end of the season 2 years ago and really become a focal point of the team and, fill that gap when Fremantle got injured, because everybody thought like, oh, Zach's hurt, the season's over. We still had good players, but, you just lose a all Big East 4-man. Like, it's going to be tough to come back from that. And he filled that role in a different way than Zach would have done it, but he filled it in all of the hustle plays and all of the things that you need somebody on your team to be able to do those things. Even if you have really, really talented offensive and defensive players, you need somebody that's going to be that guy that's just going to go. Coach Kelsey used to call them garbage pail guys. You go in, clock out, and go home and sleep, And so I think that for him, everything that's happened to him, coming back, if he's able to play, you want to talk about taking the game from somebody. He almost got his life taken from him. Like, this guy's going to come back, and I think he's going to be super motivated to get back on the floor. And I think that you're going to see that in his effort and the amount of work that he puts in to get back.
Yeah, I mean, that's the atmosphere for that game when he first checks back in. It's just going to be off the charts. Like, it's going to be an all-time moment at Cintas Center. And, there are bigger things to think about. We all understand that, and we're all hoping for the best from that perspective with Jerome, that he can get everything back on track for those reasons. But also, I mean, from the basketball perspective, it's like, as much as I find it hard to believe that he's going to be full go 100% playing like his old self for the start of the season, there's part of me that thinks, like, even if they missed on all of these guys in the portal, the idea that you could just put Jerome at the 4 and Zach at the 5 this year potentially might be enough, and that's a very different spot than you were in last season.
Right. And it's always nice to have that fallback plan, like, even if I really believe that these guys are going to pan out and they're going to be good, but if for some reason they don't, it's nice to have a backup plan, which they didn't have a first plan last year. So it's nice to have two plans this year.
Right. And you were talking about those two guys, and we already talked about, Hughley has to work himself back into shape after coming off a knee injury. And the year before that, he missed pretty much the whole year because of a knee injury and some other stuff he was dealing with mentally. You also have a guy like Fletcher who's coming back from back-to-back ACL injuries. How much do you have concerns about just like the number of guys that you rely on to come back from an injury or a major absence? Like, is that part of a concern that's factoring in for you about this team?
I mean, I think the way that sports medicine has developed in the last decade, like, obviously you're still going to have chronic injuries that just keep coming back and there's not much you can do. But with the medical staff and just everything that Xavier has, I mean, even when I was there, I felt like there's nothing that could have happened to me that they wouldn't have me back on the court and be 100%. Like, they were very good. So I think that being in the hands of Xavier's medical people, and I really put a lot of faith in that. And I know that you have, like, with Fremantle, his foot's been hurt twice now. It's tough, but I'm just an optimist. In my mind, it's like we're gonna be good. We're gonna make it through the season. Everything's gonna be fine.
And kind of the flip side of that I think is really positive for Xavier fans is last year, when you're looking for the upside on the team, it's like, well, Sasha or Lazar, maybe they have some upside, right? Because there's talent there that's untapped. Right. Yep. But underclassmen, and we've heard Sean talk about this a lot since the end of the season, underclassmen in the current college basketball landscape, it seems like it's just really difficult for them to find success, especially in the Big East. And I would even argue for big men, that might go double. Like it's even harder as a big man to find success early on with the transfer portal being what it is. This year, Xavier, you can question anything you want about this team, but you're not going to expect question the level of experience. Like all of these guys have multiple years of college basketball experience under their belt. It's going to be a very old team, especially when you look at that front court. How much of that do you buy into in terms of it being really difficult for the underclassmen now because of the transfer portal?
Oh, I mean, I think it's going to be damn near impossible for anybody outside of a top 10, top 15 freshman to make any noise for a high level team, because it's like we were talking about earlier. You have guys that can perform already at a high level because you're watching them play against other high level players and dominating. So when then you have a freshman coming in who, number one, I don't care who you are. I shouldn't say that. Some people are ready for it, but for the most part, the speed and strength and skill and just like the speed of the game and the speed of the players and the guys that you're guarding, it's a culture shock when you first get there. I mean, I remember the very first open gym that I played with Jason Love, and he backed into me and hit me in the chest, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Like, I mean, I took my breath away. And it's like, I was just as big and just as strong as him, but it's just like, you don't know how to use that yet. And he had 2 years of playing against Derek Brown and playing against, Division I college basketball players in big time games. So it's just different, and it takes time to get used to it. I think that halfway through a season, it's very different than the first open gym. Like half of a season, I think, is enough for a big guy to be able, especially a young big guy, to go in and be able to feel like he has the experience to like go in and play well in a game. But coming right out of high school, it's very difficult. And you're not getting into situations anymore where you can just kind of fill a gap that the team might have, because they're just going out to the portal and they're taking somebody to fill that gap. So you're really trying to beat out a guy that's already established and has been for maybe a couple years.
Yeah. I mean, we look at these guys who average 8 or 9 points a game and 6 rebounds, like they're not impact guys at the high major level, or they're dispensable, but it's like that production, to try to replace that with a guy who's never done anything and doesn't know how hard you have to play and is going to make a lot of mistakes along with it. It's like there's value in the guy who's already been there, done it, and has the production and has experience. And so it's just an interesting time in college basketball. And I'm interested to see especially how programs like Marquette do, trying to do it a different way without using the portal and things like that. Those experiences will be fun to watch too.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think gets overlooked as well from an outsider's perspective is you get recruited by these coaches, right? Coming out of high school, you get recruited by these coaches, and everything is all, flowers and rainbows when you're getting recruited by the coach. Then you get on campus and dealing with a college coach and the intensity of practice and the intensity of strength workouts, that is not for everybody. And sometimes you figure that out too late. And, I can think of I'm not going to name them right now, but I can think of a couple guys that I played with that they were not ready for that. And they didn't survive in high level Division I basketball because it's just different. It's not just what you're seeing on the court. Dealing with coaches, dealing with your teammates, all of that stuff. These are grown men that you're walking into the locker room with, and you're an 18-year-old kid. It is difficult to do as a freshman.
Donovan Mitchell, I just saw him on a podcast telling a great story about Coach Pitino, where he's like, I was on my visit and the experienced guys on the roster were telling me, like, you don't want to do this. Yeah. Coach Pitino's crazy. Don't come here. He's like, what are you talking about? He seems pretty cool. I'm seeing you guys work out. It seems pretty normal. Seems you guys are doing well. And he's like, and I got there the first week and he's like, it was hell. He's like, we go on a trip to play in the Puerto Rico event. He's like, I get one blow by in a game. And he says, I need to lose 30 pounds by the start of the season because I was too fat. Like, he's just crazy.
I'm telling you, man, it's not something you think about because you're getting recruited at such a high level and you're like, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to be the man, I'm going to be the guy, blah, blah, blah. And, some guys do that, some guys are the one and dones and they're able to make that work for themselves. But just your normal run of the mill, top 20, top 40 prospect that's not going to the NBA after 1 year, it's a big culture shock. And you realize, I never disliked Coach Miller, but just the way that he went about practice and the intensity that you have to have. Obviously, I know that that's what I needed to do to make me better now. But when I was 18 and a half, 19 years old going into practice, and I'm like, man, what in the world did I get myself into here?
Yeah, sure. You see that look on a lot of young guys' faces on these early practices,
well,
especially when August
you've seen the look that Coach Miller gives in the huddles. Remember we were talking about it last year when he
staring to the different guys. That's incredible.
It's still to this day when I see that look, it gets like I'm like, whoa, did I do something? Like somebody sent me a picture of him. He was like, he had a tuck shirt in and he was looking up and talking to me, and on his face you can just see like he's trying to tell me something that I did wrong, but he doesn't want to say it too harshly. And I sent him the picture and he was like, what do you think I was saying there? And I was like, I have no idea, man. I don't think about
it. So we're talking just all the work that Xavier did in the portal this year. There was a lot of movement, and sometimes that can be looked upon negatively. Obviously, I think we all agree that this year it needed to happen for Xavier to get in a better place from a roster standpoint. But everyone would have taken Desmond Claude back, I think. They would have liked to have a player of his caliber back. Were there any other players who left in the portal aside from Des that you were kind of hoping selfishly might stick around one more year? You thought they could be good?
I think even more so than Des, I would have loved to see Lazar stay, but I just don't know. I don't know the kid well enough to say. Obviously I was talking to Coach Mack about him when I was in Charleston, and he's all jacked up about him. He loves. I mean, just
how could he not be? Yeah,
his upside is. Yeah, but I think that he may have been one of those guys that just wasn't ready for the level of intensity that a coach like Coach Miller is going to coach you with. I don't think that he was ready for that. And it's not for everybody. You have to have a really thick skin, and you have to understand that they're just trying to make you better. And it's not that they don't dislike you. It's not personal. But I wish that he would have stayed, because I think that his upside is insane. He has the body type to be a lottery pick, but I just don't know what his work ethic was like. I have not really talked about him too much with anybody that's on the inside of that. They, even with that kind of stuff, even with me, they're going to keep a tight lip on it. So it's like, I just don't know what was really going on behind the scenes. I talked about this on one of your spaces before with Des leaving. It would have been like, if you just throw Des on this exact team, and they probably wouldn't have gotten, they wouldn't have gone after Conwell or Maddox or something if Des was staying. So who knows what that situation would have been. But you throw Des on this team right now, and I think that he's splitting minutes with somebody. I don't think that he's going to be coming back averaging 27 points a game or whatever the heck it was last year. He would have had to
change his role at least, right?
100%. With all these shooters, he's damn near a 4-man.
Yeah, seriously. He'd have to be like much better defensively, much more efficient offensively, because they're not going to have the shots and the possessions to just throw away. Right. Last year was like, we don't have any other options. You got to go create something. Right. And maybe he would have been improved because there were better options to share the ball with too. Right. That's always a possibility.
I'm sure that he would have changed. I'm sure he would have been an impact player. I'm not, because he's a fantastic player.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying with the guys they have now, the inside presence they have, because probably 80% of his points were scored within 15 feet of the bucket. I don't know what the exact number is on that, but it had to have been close to that, 60, 70.
Yeah. And they probably should have been, if not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, when you have all these shooters and you have threats down low with Fremantle and Hughley coming in, and obviously Traore and Fletcher as well, but I just don't really know where he would have fit in on the team. So I don't think that I was, because that news when he left and when we got Conwell, or was it Maddox or Conwell, that it was like boom, boom.
Conwell was right after the Des news. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like you get the news that Des is leaving, and it sucks. And then you hear like, oh, this guy's coming in, that's, he's shooting 37% from three, and he's a prolific scorer. You're like, all right, well, we'll be all right.
Yeah. People are so high on Conwell. They had already gotten the Maddox news earlier in the week, and then the Conwell news happened right after. And it's like, honestly, in terms of fit and what this backcourt can do, it feels like it's better than last year's. And that's, don't get me wrong, it's hard to say you replace a Quincy Oliveri and a Desmond Claude with two mid-major guys and you're better. No. But the way this backcourt works within that system, it's hard not to get excited about what they could be capable of.
Yeah. And I don't know if maybe it's just something that I'm thinking that it's bigger in my head than what it actually is. But the fact that one of them's right-handed and one of them's left-handed is like, it's an interesting thing to think about. And with how fast they play when you're going down in transition, for a defender to have to think about that as well. Like, which hand is he going to shoot with? And, I'm taking arrows in the back while this guy's catching a shot. And how am I going to get up there and defend it? I won't be surprised if you see some guys jump the wrong way trying to block their shots this year. I think that's going to be a funny thing. So
I love having lefties on the court for that reason. They're just different. They make things a little weird. They rip to the other side sometimes you're not expecting. Like,
right, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Last question. This was from someone on the message board. I said, hey, we're going to be recording this. If you guys have anything, throw it out there. And they said, with summer workouts in full swing, Xavier's in their 4th week of 8 weeks of summer workouts right now. What was the hardest workout or practice that Kenny experienced while playing for Xavier? Do you have one that sticks out for you? A good story, maybe?
I mean, what was it called? The Riley drill, the Pat Riley drill. It was the one where you had to do that was always the big thing, because it was what ended preseason.
Summer conditioning.
Yeah. So in the summer, or the very beginning of summer, you had to run the mile. And for whatever reason, I was always really good with the mile. I never missed it. And then that gave you I think 3 or 4 weeks of just doing your own personal workouts and not having to come in at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning and do conditioning. But then, you go through this whole thing and you have the treadmill workouts, which were just a nightmare. And then, you're just in such good shape, but then you have to do this drill at the end of the season where it's, you have 60 seconds. The bigs had 60 seconds to do, I think it was 6 down and backs. And you had to be able to do that it was 60 seconds, and you had to get an average for your whole time. So you would if you did one in 57 seconds, the next time you could get 63 and you were still within the time to do it. Those were the hardest. That was the hardest workout to do. And it was all mental, because it's not the most insane thing. It's over pretty quick. But it's just those workouts were the worst. That final workout of preseason right before practice is going to start was I dreaded it every year.
For the most part, though, you guys had relatively short practices, once the season started, right? Matt kept them pretty short compared to a lot of coaches I've been around.
Yeah. I mean, I would say at the beginning of the year, we were running 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But then by mid-season, we would be halfway through A10 play or whatever. We were probably running an hour and a half. And then you get towards the end and it's just glorified walkthroughs. I mean, because you're in such good shape at that point. And there's so many different things to worry about injury wise, and just, not running your body down. It's a lot of games, obviously not from an NBA perspective or whatever, but you're playing damn near 40 games in a year. And it's a lot when you get towards the end of the season.
Two Holloway's playing 39.6 minutes per game. Let's take it easy today in practice.
I'm pretty sure his senior year, he averaged over 40 minutes a game, because we had we had 2 or 3 overtime games, and he averaged 40 minutes and 12 seconds or something.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, Kenny, I've kept you long enough. This has been great stuff. I know not a ton of insight for us to actually go on, but it's fun just to BS about the roster and the team this time of year anyway, when not a lot is going on. So hopefully we can do it again closer to the season. I appreciate you doing this.
100%. Anytime, man.
All right. That's Kenny Frease, everybody. Appreciate you guys listening to another edition of the Musketeer Report Podcast.